Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Ionian Mode. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 5.4 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So now that you have a basic overview of the modes of the major scale, we're going to take a look at each of the modes individually. And in this lesson, we're going to look at the first mode, the Ionian Mode. And in these lessons, the main thing we're going to look at is how to use these modes to improvise or solo over chords. You already have the concept of the other important part of the modes, and that's what chords are built out of each modes. And we went over that in depth. We just didn't talk about them being the modes, but we went over one chords, two chords, and so on. And that's all mode based. So for example, all the chords that you can get as one chords are Ionian chords. All the chords you can get as two chords are Dorian chords, and so on. So that's going to all tie in together with what we're talking about with soloing and so on in these lessons. So as you remember from the previous lessons, I said that the Ionian mode is the first mode of the major scale, and it is the major scale. So it's the exact same thing as the major scale. What's on your screen right now is the G major scale because all those roots are G's, and we just have your whole step, half step, and so on. So this is the G major scale, but it's also the G Ionian mode. So those terms are interchangeable. So you already know that the intervals of the major scale are root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and back to root, or just root 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what we're going to look at as we're going through each of these modes are, for one, the intervals, which we just did with this Ionian mode, but you already knew the intervals for this. We're also going to look at the sound that it produces, because the modes, a really important thing about the modes is what sound, what emotion they produce compared to each other, and we'll cover that in depth, and also what chords you would use to solo over with this mode, and then what are called strong or weak tones or avoid notes, which I'll cover soon. So first off, the Ionian mode, the major scale, is a happy major sound. And it's the sound that in Western music is the most recognizable for any type of scale. All of Western music is basically built out of the major scale. And we've heard it so much in Western music that it's such a recognizable sound that you know it right away. It's the do, re, mi sound. It's just super recognizable. And that's why when I was saying when you're looking at modes in series, when they're all coming out of the same key, it can be hard to hear each of those modes if you just play, for example, the Ionian mode from root to root. That's really easy to hear. But then if you move to the Dorian mode on the next note of that scale and play it from root to root, it'll be really hard to hear it just by itself without a backing track or something to really give you that sound, because your ear is going to keep going back to the major scale sound because we're so used to it. In the Ionian mode, you would use this to solo or improvise over major chord or major 7 chord. Those are the two main chords. But also any of the chords that I told you were one chords in the previous lessons, you would use the Ionian mode. And when you're soloing with this, your strongest tones are your root, your 3, and your 5. Those are always going to sound good when you're soloing over major chords. And that's because, as you know, major chords are built root, 3, 5. So those intervals are chord tones, or what are called chord tones. Those are in the chord. So when you're using this to solo over, for example, a G major chord, because this is the G major scale, G Ionian mode, this is a G, this is a B, and this is a D, which is the 1, 3, 5 in the G major scale. Well, a G major chord, as you know, is just a 1, 3, 5, a root 3, 5, and that's built up of a G, B, D. So those are chord tones, the 1, 3, 5, because they're coming right out of that triad. And then if you're soloing over a G major 7, you know a major 7 is a root 3, 5, 7, major 7. So that just adds in the 7th, when that would become a chord tone as well, which in the key of F, and which in the key of G is F sharp. So a G major 7 is a G, B, D, F sharp. So any of these intervals are chord tones as well and would sound really strong. And the 7 is not as strong as the root 3/5, is not as what would be called stable as far as being able to land on it and just really land on it and it feels like it's resting. You have to be a little more careful, use your ear a little more, and it really depends on the playing situation. But typically when you're actually playing over a G major 7 or a major 7 chord, you can throw that in really easily and it's going to sound really strong. There are cases when you're playing over chords that aren't major 7s that it's not going to sound as strong, so you just have to use your ear. And in jazz, it's a very strong tone. It's one used all the time. But if you get into more rock styles or anything, it's not going to sound as strong. It might sound a little off. So you just have to be careful when you're using that note. So those are your strongest tones. Your 2, which is also your 9, and your 6, which is also your 13, you can use as well. Those are going to sound good, but you have to be careful. You just have to use your ears. They're not as strong as the root 3/5 or 7, so just use your ears when you're improvising. The 4 is what's called an avoid tone, an avoid note. And I don't really like that term, but it's a common musical term, so I'll use it. When you're saying avoid note, you're not saying not to actually play that note. What you're saying is that it's not a stable tone to land on and just rest. And that's because of the interval distance between the root and the third. That's a minor second, which is a very dissonant interval. So when you hit this 4, if you're improvising over a major chord, it really has a strong pull wanting to go back to the 3 or up to the 5 to resolve. If you just land on it, it's going to sound really dissonant, so you'd have to listen to that. And that's why it's called an avoid note, because it's a very dissonant tone and it doesn't sound strong at all when you just land on it. You want to use it as a color tone, as a passing tone, play it. You can even emphasize it, but just landing on it is going to sound really weak, so you have to be really careful about that. And what I recommend doing is just taking a backing track or loop something that is just you can start in the key of G, it's just a G major chord, and slowly play this scale over the G major chord and listen to each tone. And you'll be able to hear which ones sound really strong and which ones sound really weak. So just do that, play it really slow, then play it over a G major 7 chord and do the same thing and hear the difference and see which tones sound really strong or which sound weak. Then you can do it over any of the 1 chords that we went over. Get a backing track or loop something of any of the 1 chords that we went over, do it again, and you'll just be able to hear how all these intervals sound over the different 1 chords, which are Ionian chords. And then when you can do that, once you really hear the sound of the intervals over those chords, you can just start improvising, just start soloing by starting to randomize the order. Don't just play the scale up and down, just play the notes randomly, and just eventually you're going to be able to come up with cool melodies, and that's what you try to do, come up with melodies and things that sound good, not just playing a scale up and down over the chords. But that's really going to help you get the sound of this mode in your ears and in context over the chords you would be playing it over. And I'm developing a course where I'm going to actually have all the jam tracks and do demonstrations of this, but for now, if you could just have a looper, or if you have a way to record something, or if you find a jam track online, just do it yourself. And any major chord really, so if you find a C major chord, play the C Ionian mode, C major 7 chord, C Ionian mode, etc. So you already know this chart, we've gone over this chart many times, but it'll make more sense why I'm showing it again as we go through the other modes, because I'm going to rearrange it for each mode. But again, the 1 chords are your Ionian mode, the major scale, same thing. So here's A major, B flat major, B major, or A Ionian, B flat Ionian, B Ionian, and so on. And then this last chart we're going to fill out as we go through, and this will be a really useful chart to keep and look up anytime you need to. And that's the number of the mode, obviously just 1 through 7, because there's 7 modes of the major scale. The name of the mode, we're on Ionian now. The formula, obviously just root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the major scale. Your triad that you get out of is major, your 7th chord is major 7th, and then you have the lessons that showed you all the 1 chords you can get, the most common ones, and you have charts for that as well, which are all Ionian chords. Your avoid note, which is the 4 or 11, the same thing. And like I said, it's not avoid as in don't play it, it's avoid as in be careful about landing on it, because it's not going to sound strong. It's going to sound pretty dissonant. It's going to sound like it wants to go somewhere else, wants to resolve somewhere else. And here, this is your parent major scale, and it's a little confusing with the Ionian mode because there's not really a parent major scale. The Ionian mode is the major scale, but this is just saying that the root note is the parent major scale, or it's actually just the major scale. So that'll make more sense as we get into the other ones, into the other modes, and I'll explain what this is really saying. But for now, if you're playing a G Ionian mode, G, the root, is also the major scale. And it's unique character because each mode has a unique character from each other. There's something that sets it apart from all the other modes. And for the Ionian mode, the major scale, it's that it has no accidentals, meaning that nothing is sharped or flatted in the intervals. Obviously, if you're playing in a key that has sharps and flats, that's different, but we're not talking about the actual notes that have sharps and flats. We're just talking about the intervals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, there's no flat 2, there's no flat 3, there's no sharp 4 or anything. It's just all natural notes. And then the color, meaning what the sound of it is a happy major sound, and it's the most recognizable sound in Western music. So we're so used to hearing it that you know it as soon as you hear it. And this will be more useful as we get into the other modes and really dive into the differences between everything. But I want to start you off looking at this because we're going to fill it out as we go, and it'll be in your e-guide. So this will be a really useful chart to look up anytime you have a question or as you're learning the modes. So that's the Ionian mode, the first mode of the major scale, which is also the major scale. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where we're going to look at the second mode of the major scale, which is the Dorian mode. And be sure to download this e-guide. All these charts are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.